We need to briefly discuss the Canada free practice 1 and 2 sessions together. We saw that Leclerc hit the wall, he made a mistake, but also the same Lewis Hamilton made another mistake at the hairpin, but he didn't hit the wall. Therefore, we need to examine the accident dynamics together and provide commentary. Let's take a look at Ferrari's performance, which so far is not very reassuring, but now let's see together why. In addition, we also need to look at Vasseur's statements, who for the first time in his career at Ferrari has taken a stand against the management. And let's also see his words. Before we start, please like, subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated with the channel's videos. Don't forget. A supportive like is crucial to support the content. We will also look at the telemetry and discuss it together. Having said that, I want to start by first discussing the times of the free trials 2. So let's take a moment with the leaderboard. We see a Mercedes up front, so Russell in first position, second position for Norris, third position for Antonelli. A Mercedes in first and third position with a big leap forward, also thanks to the modifications made to the rear suspension. And they had said it, Canada could be a friendly track to the V16. Toto Wolff had also said it before this weekend, and we saw a great Mercedes, especially on the qualifying pace. Still needs to work on the race pace. McLaren remains the favorite, according to Norris. Piastri had a bit more trouble, but I want to start by commenting on the other part. Ranking, if we want. 4th Albon, 5th Alonso. So be careful. A Williams and an Aston Martin are placed ahead of Hamilton's Ferrari. Sainz as well, so be careful that both Williams drivers and Aston Martin with Alonso, they can be rivals of Ferrari in the fight, especially in qualifying. So be careful in qualifying because Ferrari will be there in the fight. Not only with the top teams, so with Mercedes and McLaren, they seem to be more favored in qualifying, so I'll let them stay. However, Ferrari is not only in a fight with Red Bull, it's also in a fight with Williams and Aston Martin. And so it will fight for that potential 5th or 6th position that we now see this season. Hamilton has taken a risk. Obviously, I said it before, but I want to repeat it. Leclerc made a mistake in free practice. 1, he hit the wall and therefore missed free practice. 2, while Hamilton spun around. Let's take a moment to look at the incidents that occurred with Hamilton and Leclerc, and then we'll also comment on Hamilton's words after the first day of testing. So let's start with Leclerc's accident, which perhaps was an accident that could have been objectively avoided because it compromised the whole day. And it's an accident where it's clear that he goes long. Now let's look at it together. In a turn, among other things, where you usually never hit the wall. Here we see the exit of turn 1 to the chicane, and we move on here at the entrance. Now we see that he enters. Leclerc goes to the lock of the right front. It is clearly seen, and here he cannot make the turn. It is blatantly obvious. He must either go long, so use the escape route here on the left, or try to make the turn to the right, but with the risk of spinning. And what does he do? He takes a middle path. That is, he does not go either totally to the right or totally to the left. He stays in the middle, for in the middle there is grass, which is very slippery. Then in Montreal. And so he hits with the left front and therefore breaks the suspension. This is disastrous for Leclerc. In fact, he immediately apologizes. The accident is very serious, I have to be honest, that of Leclerc. First, I want to show you the mistake the English driver made, which however cost him nothing because he still managed to save it. At the hairpin turn, we see here that he arrives. Let's move on. And here he loses the rear in the middle of the turn because he tightens the hairpin turn too much towards the inside and therefore loses the rear, but at a very low speed. Here at the hairpin turn then, he spins the car and then manages to stop it easily. This is to tell you that Ferrari's start in Montreal today was very bad, I have to be honest. They also brought some updates on the front wing. Now I'll show you this update brought to Montreal by Ferrari on the modified front wing. This was the old one, with an edge, a flap line, the last flap a bit softer, which goes down. Instead, here it is more drastic to better direct the flows to the rear. However, let's say that this new wing of Ferrari also goes against the trend compared to the other wings we have seen from other teams. And it's a response, obviously, to the TD018 that was issued in Spain. However, beyond these small changes, the modification of the front wing brought, for goodness sake, a first step to find the right direction. However, the other teams, let's think for example to McLaren, even McLaren has modified the suspension. Literally, look here at the front, small modification on the outer part. There is a lamplight, for goodness sake, it's there. Then modification of the front suspension arms, modification of the rear arm, that is the front suspension arm, the rear arm. In short, many structural changes, a sign that they know the right direction to go. And these changes are due obviously also for the TD018, but even Mercedes itself has modified the rear suspension. I said it before too, the other teams bring big innovations. Ferrari continues to wait and postpone updates, which we will now see in Austria with the new bottom. There is also talk of a new rear suspension. At Silverstone, however, you understand that in terms of timing, we are always behind the opponents. And what impressed me the most are Hamilton's words at the end of this first day. In Canada, in fact, not having the words in that sense, do you believe he hit the wall? So he didn't have another extra session to, let's say, test the Scuderia Ferrari 25 on the track. Hamilton went out on a limb and said it was a session, a terrible day. Both free practice, 1 and free practice, 2 free practice. 1 was a start, a little bit better. We found the right setup. We changed the setup in free practice, 2. And then it was a disaster, a disaster. And the car doesn't rotate, the car doesn't turn. It's clearly visible. Now I'll show you Hamilton's onboard as well, because we need to see, with data in hand, what Hamilton could do and how Hamilton is driving this Scuderia Ferrari 25. In fact, if we look together at Hamilton's time with soft tires, it's clearly visible that at some points he doesn't even go to take the apex. Let's move on. This 1-2 chicane is quite good. Wait a moment, I'll lower the volume. Already here we see that it doesn't even take too much. The curb is a bit further away to rotate the car a bit more and maintain a higher top speed during the course. Taking the curb would unbalance the single-seater, which Hamilton wants to avoid. That's why he doesn't go over the curb. Let's move on. Even here, he avoids the curb. He doesn't go there heavily. But here in this curve, the difference is even more clear. Look here, he barely touches it, he brushes it, but he doesn't go aggressive like others do. Even here, he comes in slightly long on the brakes. In fact, you see that he passes next to the curb, a curb that usually in the past was faced head-on. That is, they used to hit it hard, also to have the car straighter for the next turn. And instead here, he almost passes around it, and here too, he goes very lightly on the curbs. Hamilton all over the track and at the hairpin. Look here, it's something absurd. In fact, here he goes with a slight micro-lock. He did it, in fact, you see the right front a little bit, but he still goes very long here, guys. Look, to have more traction on exit, he goes very long. Hamilton at the hairpin. And it's a very paradoxical situation because you should cover less distance and still come out stronger, try to stay closer to the curb anyway. In this case, however, Hamilton takes a very strange trajectory and moving forward to the last chicane, which is where he struggled the most. On this first day of free practice, where he said, I have rear lockups, I'm losing the rear, something he said they will definitely resolve. Then for Saturday's day, so for today for the qualifications. Here, look at how he tackles the last chicane. We move forward detached. You see that he is not so aggressive on the curb. Even in this case, he goes slightly to take it. However, the car is very composed because it doesn't force the braking. It doesn't detach aggressively. Despite the soft tire, in this case the C6, because in Canada they bring the C4, C5, C6 tires. Here, Hamilton is not very comfortable with this tire. And another thing I add in parentheses about the qualifying tires, which, as Russell also said, in qualifying we might see some drivers using the medium, because the medium is, the C5 is still a very competitive tire and it allows you to do the lap with the same temperature in all sectors. So the C6 is very sensitive to temperature changes, and you might have a tire a bit more overheated in one spot compared to another, while the C5 is a bit more consistent. So there could also be this choice. And no race even joked. I will probably use the hard, which anyway, the hard is a C4, so also pay attention to this. So now I want to show you before seeing the telemetry. We have to comment on 2 important things. The first is Derek Warwick, who is the steward of the Canada Grand Prix. He was suspended because he made statements about Lewis Hamilton and Yuki Tsunoda, specifically on news. Hamilton said, "I don't see him motivated. In my opinion, he will finish the season and then retire." And a steward obviously can't make statements of this magnitude. He can't be a commentator, a steward who works for the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, and therefore he was suspended. And a statement that, in my opinion, fits. This is exactly the statement he made. So he is thinking of stopping. This is what Derek Warwick said about Hamilton. And Stewart obviously can't make these statements, so it makes sense that he gets suspended. Then I want to comment on something even more important. That is what Vasseur said. Is that these are the statements. You see them here, fixed at the top. So we all have to ask ourselves the right questions if Ferrari hasn't won for so many years. And we've changed team principles, the drivers. We've changed everything except one thing. And this is a direct attack on Ferrari's management. It's a direct attack on Benedetto Vigna, so be aware that the chief executive officer in this case has been attacked. John Elkann is already thinking of replacing several people within the Stellantis group and also in Juventus, and so Benedetto Vigna himself could also be replaced this year. But not only that. If Vasseur has made these statements, it means that Vasseur himself, who has a 3-year contract, let's remember, from 2022 to 2025, Vasseur's contract with Ferrari expires this year. Probably Vasseur will finish this season and then will be set aside. Because it's unacceptable in an environment like Ferrari that the team principal goes to attack the management. It has never happened so far. Now, Vasseur probably has gotten some things off his chest and has made these totally out of place statements, among other things, at the beginning of a weekend, so they are not justified. This is something that weighs a lot, and tells us that Vasseur is probably out of Ferrari's management for the next few years. This is obviously an assumption. Even Giuliano Duchessa himself has intervened on the matter, he said, after hearing Vasseur in the statements he made in the interviews. In my view, he is out of the project. This was also stated by a source very close to Ferrari. In short, many people claim that Vasseur is now out. These statements made in such an important way support this thesis, and we will see. Surely Vasseur has not touched the piano. He also said that part of the responsibility lies with the Italian journalists who intervened against him. He knew he had a role with a lot of pressure and that he would always be the center of attention at Ferrari, but he didn't think it would be so difficult to handle the pressure from the local media. Having said that, let's take a look. Also, tell me what you think about Vasseur. Who could be his replacement if necessary? How do you see the situation at Ferrari? In my view, the situation is quite chaotic. Yeah, among other things, there was also another intervention that I want to report to you. Here it is. Ferrari is trying to strengthen the engineering team, but it's hard to find engineering technicians who go to Maranello to work. And here we reconnect again to the theme of the headquarters in England, which would be fundamental for Ferrari to adapt to the standards of all the current Formula One teams, including Mercedes itself, which is headquartered in Germany, and then the Formula One headquarters in Brackley, England. So there's also this issue to dissect, if you will, for the future. And I also bring you the words of Giuliano Duchessa in Pornodici Vasori has decided for the clash. My feeling is that we should not expect any immediate intervention from the Ferrari leadership, so there will be no intervention now. The triennial expires at the end of the year. I forgot it carefully, and from the way he spoke today, I had the personal feeling that he will not stay. So he will probably leave at the end of the year. Having said that, let's look at the situation instead. On the qualification side, this is the qualifying simulation pace. So simulation, qualification pace. We see Mercedes up front. I put the other side, Mercedes up front, then McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari. I would add, watch out for Williams and Aston Martin. It's true they are behind Ferrari, but they could also get ahead. And Red Bull is there, competing with Ferrari, in my opinion. So this is the simulation pace, in my opinion. Mercedes and McLaren are ahead, and they are fighting for the pole. With McLaren still favored, but Mercedes is there, close, and it's possible. They are both contenders. Then there's Ferrari and Red Bull very close. Perhaps Ferrari has a slight advantage, but it would have it with Leclerc, who nonetheless had an accident in free practice. So be careful in the sense that Ferrari could still be disadvantaged by this situation that has arisen. But Red Bull only has Maxi Williams with both Albon and Sainz, especially Albon up front, and watch out for San Martin with Alonso. If we go to see the times, let's take the times, even in this case, of the free practice 2. Alright, let's see the times of the free practice 2 because I want to show you both the difference. Wait a moment, both the difference on the race pace and also the difference. Then we go to see the difference on the race pace and then the difference on the qualification. First we see qualification that we have already said. The times, these are the times. Verstappen 1:12.6, Norris 1:12.1, Russell 1:12.1, and Hamilton 1:12.6. So we see Red Bull and Ferrari on the same time, Mercedes and McLaren on the same time. Where does the difference lie between Mercedes and McLaren versus Red Bull and Ferrari? Mainly in the second sector. In fact, we see that at the end, the first sector, they are all very close. Red Bull struggles more in attacking the curbs, so going aggressive on the curbs, and we've seen it throughout the second sector. And also at the hairpin turn to rotate the car. It also struggles a bit in traction. Ferrari struggles more in traction than in attacking the curbs. So if we want, Red Bull struggles more on entry, Ferrari struggles more on exit. Mercedes falls in the middle while Ferrari has a more charged setup compared to Red Bull's more discharged configuration. McLaren loses a bit in the stretches, but it has more traction, better traction compared to Mercedes. And this is also seen from the graphics, from the delta time and from the speeds. If you see, for example, Red Bull has the lowest minimum speeds. Ferrari struggles a lot with traction. In fact, we see here, for example, the worst traction of all the others. There are several points also in braking. We see that Max struggles to brake the car. He has an entrance struggle with this RB21. And it's obvious if we want to. Even Mercedes is not strong in braking as McLaren is, for example, but it is stronger in acceleration. McLaren and Ferrari are stronger in braking. Mercedes and Red Bull excel in acceleration, with Mercedes having a greater edge than Red Bull, while McLaren outperforms Ferrari in this area. This is a bit of a summary of how the cars are working at this moment. If we also look at the race pace, we see a Mercedes that has done a very long average race pace simulation. Times have risen significantly. In fact, it was on the low side in the 16-lap race pace simulation. Then it rose to the high 16, and Russell even touched the low 17. While McLaren was very low with the race pace simulation on the low 16, then it rose, reached 17, but after many laps, and Red Bull did a few laps on the low 16. Red Bull is stronger on pace compared to Mercedes. So essentially, if we want to give the favorites, McLaren and Mercedes qualify while McLaren and Red Bull race. In this case, I would say, obviously, I also lean on the forecast for the qualifications. Then let me know yours as well. And I say, in my opinion, also looking at the FP2 standings, I tell you Norris, Russell, and then I put Verstappen. Third, I should put Antonelli. I could also put Antonelli or Piastri. Actually, no, come on. I'll do Norris, Russell, Piastri. Come on, Norris, Russell, Piastri. This is my next for the qualifications. Tell me yours in the comments. Of course, tell me your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and enable notifications to catch all the videos on this channel. Let's analyze the onboards, the telemetries, the times, everything. And here from now on, that's all. See you next time.